Hello, everyone. You're watching God, Sex, and Love. It's your girl, Miracle Sims. And tonight we're chatting with Miss Bree Tartaglione. So if you don't mind learning more about her and her powerful testimony, then stay tuned.
Not hard to figure out that I'm not the type of girl that goes around and fools around. Think I'm so done with that crazy part of my past. So don't get so old to ask, 'cause I won't go there. So be aware, yeah. I'm good, but I bet
Welcome back to God, Sex, and Love. I am here with Miss Bree Tartaglione. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Like I said, I just want to make sure I say people's names right, man.
Hey, names are so important. I totally get it. You nailed it. Spot on.
Yeah. I was like, let me say that right now. Well, welcome to God, Sex, and Love. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I look forward to the conversation.
Yes, me too. So tell us, tell everyone where you're from and a little bit about yourself.
Um, I was born and raised in New England from Rhode Island. I made my way to New York, so just outside of the New England area. And I actually live and work in the city. At this point right now, I'm just full force into my own business. So I have a mental health services business where I do mostly speaking, but I also do workshops and training. I do have a coaching piece to the practice as well. And I'm a certified school counselor and working on my full clinical mental health counseling license right now.
Wow, that is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on all of that. People that watch GSL, they know I always say this. I love my entrepreneurs. So yeah, shout out to you, man.
Yes,
Ah, you said something big there. So you say you're into the whole mental health aspect. That's huge
Mhm.
right now. Very, very
Absolutely.
huge. Oh,
Absolutely.
so what was your well, I was gonna say what was your inspiration, but I mean, I guess everybody knows somebody that has some type of mental health issues, right? But
For
we'd love to
sure.
hear more details about that. Like, how did you get into it, and what made you say, "Let me branch out on my own and do this thing"?
Yeah. Well, first to go into mental health, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do for a pretty long time. I went to undergrad. I was a communications major. It was broad enough that I could go into a lot of things at that point. I ended up landing in education. And I really loved education, but I wasn't particularly passionate about a specific subject. And I realized that the students that I was working with at the time, I was a teaching assistant, and I was working with students of varied social, emotional, and behavioral abilities. So I found that I really liked this space. I liked being able to help students and adolescents kind of work through and navigate those really difficult spaces, especially in middle school at that middle age. And that's where I was working. So from there, that's when I was like, oh, I think I want to go into counseling because that is where I would really get to work on those social, emotional, behavioral pieces, that mental health piece. So that's when I came to New York, went to grad school out here and loved it out here. So ended up staying. And that's where my school counseling license came from. And after the pandemic, lots of things happened. For me specifically, I went through a really uh, crazy, unexpected medical journey that I would be happy to share if that's this is a space for it. But that was really the transition for me to segue out of schools and to transition into building my own practice, telling my story, being able to go into counseling with adults as well.
Wow,
Yeah.
man. Um, Again, I commend you for stepping out. I feel like it's stepping out on faith when especially going into business and being an entrepreneur is like a big move. So again, congratulations on that. Um, I love that you were in the schools at one point because again, kids definitely need that outlet to be able to talk and everything like that. So I'm glad that you were that person for a lot of people at one time, the younger,
Yes.
generation. But even now, talking to adults too, like, as kids, we don't have those conversations. And so eventually we need to, do the work as adults and stuff. So
Yes.
um, I mean, who knows? Now that you have both, experience with both and whatnot, you might continue to work with both or whatever. But yeah, I would love to hear more about your testimony and the health things and everything, because I totally get it too. It's like for a lot of people, 2020 was definitely like that eye-opening, like world shaking thing where it's like, are you going to do for me? I feel like it was one of those things where it's like, okay, are you going to do your passions? Are you going to do your goals? Are you going to do the things that I feel like God put on our heart to do? Or are we going to like be stay stagnant and all these different things? So I'm not surprised to a certain extent with you saying that 2020 kind of shook you up and kind of pushed you to be where you are. Man, I'm glad that you were able to use that and build something versus using it in as a crutch to hold back and be like, man, this is terrible. It sucks or whatever the thing is. I don't want to do anything or whatever. And so I feel like there's a lot of people that have been building and renewing themselves in this time and season. So yeah, but I'm gonna hush. I'm gonna hear you.
No, you're spot on. Like everything you're saying, I know 2020 was such a transitional place for so many people because I mean, everyone's life was shook up, and some were shaken and pushed forward. Some were shaken and really held back. And, it did a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I definitely am aware of that. Interestingly enough, it was a coincidence of the timing of this medical experience for me because it actually happened on March 17th, 2020. And the way that I describe it to people is as the world was shutting down, this was literally my first day of remote work. So too was my body out of nowhere. So it was pretty interesting that it just happened to coincide with this major life transition for everyone, that I had this really strange experience. But the short story is, and again, I'm always happy to go into more detail, but I'll give you the outline and then we can sort of push from there. But I, out of nowhere, and at the time I would have considered myself in peak physical health. I was 28 at the time and very consistently working out, lifting in the gym, no prior medical conditions that I knew of. And this really strange tingling, almost like a pins and needles sensation, started lasted for hours. And the sensation not only lasted for hours, but it grew in intensity and it grew in location. So it started in my toes and my feet, and then it started to grow up my legs all the way through to my midsection. And this went on essentially for the whole day of the 16th, the day prior. And that was the day for the company that I was working in at the time. We were preparing to go remote. And that was, we knew everything was shutting down and everyone was going to have to go remote the following day. And, we were in a boardroom all day trying to figure out how we were going to do this thing. And I couldn't focus. I couldn't pay attention. And all my coworkers were like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't really know what's happening, but I think I'll be okay." I'm like, "Just pins and needles. It's not a big deal." But later that evening, again, the intensity and the sensation grew deeper and stronger. And I wasn't able to fall asleep. This sensation was keeping me up. And I was like, something really feels off here. And it was waking me up to the point where I had to get up in the middle of the night to try to walk it out because my legs just kept waking me up. And I found that in the morning, two things happened that prompted me to go to the emergency room. The first was when I tried to actually stand up that sort of final time in the morning, I stumbled. I really didn't have any stability in my legs at that point, and it was tough for me to walk. So I was holding the wall, and that was a real trigger for me, red flag that something's happening here. The second was when I stumbled, I actually, caught myself, and I don't know what happened, if I touched my face or something bumped into my face, but I realized, and I hadn't noticed it because I was sleeping, but that sensation had actually grew throughout my face, my skull, and my neck. So and it was sensitive to the touch. So it was like a tingling, numbing sensation all throughout my face. And I'm terribly wrong here. emergency room, and I scale emergency room desk. I think my legs are about to collapse beneath me. And no sooner than I said it, did it happen. So from there, I was paralyzed for several weeks, and doctors didn't know what was going on. I was in extreme isolation, extreme quarantine. National mandates to shut everything down were happening as I entered the hospital. So not 2 or 3 hours after I entered the hospital went into complete lockdown. And doctors were rightfully so, panicking because they're trying to obviously deal with really serious medical scenarios, but also have to get all of these patients in really intense quarantine. And so I was essentially locked in a room for several weeks. It was like they had to come in these hazmat suits, and because they just didn't know. And I had several conversations with doctors at that point after they had run every test they could, that they weren't sure what was going to happen next, if it would lead to permanent paralysis, if I'd ever be able to walk again, they couldn't tell me. If it was going to get worse, they couldn't tell me. If they were going to have to amputate, they couldn't tell me. They just couldn't figure it out. So that is the, sort of the outline of that. I'm happy to speak on everything that came out of it and everything since, but I'll just pause right there for a moment.
Oh my goodness. Honestly, that sounds like the beginning of of a powerful testimony, honestly. 'Cause it seems like you are all well. I'm assuming that none of the worst things that they pitched to you happen, right? I mean, you seem to be whole to me. I mean, I can only see half of you, but I don't think there's been any amputation or anything, right? Like, my goodness. That sounds like a lot. And then I know probably also during the quarantine situation, you might not have been able to have family and friends come visit you and things like that. So you probably was dealing with all of this alone. And
I did, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, my parents, I said I was from Rhode Island originally, and they were still there. And it's about a 4-hour drive to get to the city. And they immediately drove here. And I'm not kidding. I remember seeing a flash of my mom. I just saw, because they had me on so much medication at this point, because I was in so much pain, that sensation turned into a really sharp, terrible pain throughout my body. So they had me on a lot of medication at that point to try to help with the pain. And I remember seeing a flash of my mother. And then when I woke up again, she wasn't there. And what I had found out was they drove the 4 hours, and not an hour later were they told that they had to leave. So because of the lockdown and the quarantine. So but I am walking at this point. I think I am back in peak physical condition in a lot of different ways. This for sure, if we want me to go into the recovery process, that definitely is a huge part of the testimony, a huge part of so much of my connection with myself, with the world. And so I can definitely go into that if you'd like. Yeah.
Hey, man, I'm open to hearing it all, honestly, because I feel like, again, when people are sharing their testimonies, it happened to you, right? But then at the end of the day, your story and people hearing your testimony is going to probably bless someone else. So who knows if someone's going through something similar, or going to know someone that's going through something similar, that they can, benefit from hearing your testimony. So you are free to share whatever you would like to share here. I mean, I know it's called GSL, but we talk about everything here. This was just like, hey, we're going to talk about this too, but you're welcome to talk about anything you like. And again, I know that probably was a terrible situation to go through, especially alone. That's one of those things, man, about what happened. Because I know people still, not say joke, but I don't know if you're married or not, but like one of the main questions you get once you get married is like, when you gonna have a baby? And that was like the main thing that was happening. And I know people, they're starting back up again when it comes to me. And it's like, because we have a son now, my husband and I have a son. But, that everybody on his side of the family wants a girl. I'm telling you all of this because I just know people going through different situations, like pregnant right now, or, what you were going through and whatnot, going into the hospital alone and dealing with all of that alone. I can't even imagine. Like, I'm like, until that stuff gets rectified, I don't even know. Like, can we get, because when I did have my son, I had my, my mother, my mother-in-law, my husband was in the room. At one point, my sister was in the room. You know what I mean? People could come in and, and be there with me and for me, and I just, man, people are going through a lot alone right now. So, which goes right to mental health, right? Like, and everything like that. So, whatever you feel like sharing, I'm fine.
Okay, yeah.
Tell us how you came through, man.
I certainly will. Yeah, this is the good part of the story, the recovery process. So, about 5 days in, there was so much going through my mind, and I can talk about that mental health piece too. But about 5 days in, doctors started to put me on a medication that they thought might help. So they finally figured out a possible cause, and essentially what that cause is, it's a very rare autoimmune condition that actually typically only happens in children, which is why they didn't vet it for me, because I was 28. But the autoimmune condition, what it does is that it attacks the healthy cells in my brain and in my spine. And with that being the case, it was so miraculous to them, because the sensitivity of the brain and the spine, it is all incorporating for everything: my cognition, my speech, my language, my memory, my consciousness, my senses. Any of those could have been impacted. And it was singularly my mobility. So, kind of hearing the doctors saying that I was a miracle and that this was miraculous, that it was just one part of me that was sort of stripped and that they believe that they can get back, was incredible to them. Which, after hearing that, I was like, okay, this is, now that we know what this is, I feel the same way. Like, wow, I still have my ability to think, to love, to embrace, I have everything else, and in that transition, there was definitely some empowerment for me as well. Whether or not I was ever able to walk again, I sort of counted my blessings in that moment, the way that the doctors told me that, I'm blessed to be alive. I'm blessed to not be in a coma or in any other state. So that was really the first part, where I really didn't know that I was going to recover, but I found out the severity was not nearly as intense as it could have been. But then they put me on this medication that they hoped would work. And every day, what I would do is I would wake up in the hospital bed, and I would look down at my legs. And it's a pretty crazy thing when you're used to being able to look down at your legs and your feet, and you think that you can move them. And then, you in your head, you lift your leg and your leg lifts, and, you just do that automatic process. But I would try and it wasn't connecting. I would try to lift my leg. I couldn't do it. I would try to bend my knee. I spoke to several people, and I think my favorite description of this moment was that, and this pairs with your podcast, I received my mustard seed. And that was, I looked down, I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't bend my knee, couldn't roll my ankle, but then I went to wiggle my toes. And I, not a fraction of a millimeter, was able to wiggle my big toe. And it was like, I get chills saying it, because it was this infusion of hope and possibility, and I knew that I could do it from there. That was my mustard seed for sure. So, that moment obviously transpired to a lot of other things. I turned 29 in the hospital, and on my 29th birthday, I took my first steps again. So and from there, I mean, there's the recovery was intense and it was long, but I went from learning how to walk again to running. I used to hate running. I love it now. I do it because I can. I do it as a spiritual experience, a euphoric experience. I have since not run an official marathon, but have run marathon distances during the pandemic, because once I realized I could again, I never wanted to stop. So, so that, again, there's lots of details I can fill in about what I speak on now and more specific stories in the hospital and how this all turned into my business. But the recovery process was so empowering and life-changing for me that it pushed everything else in my life into motion.
Oh, wow, man. Well, praise God for that, man. Look,
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time, it's just amazing. Your story's amazing. Your story's amazing.
Thank you.
But for me, it's like to hear these testimonies and have these conversations with people and stuff, and knowing that at the end of the day, all I did was step out on faith in 2020, right, and be like, I'm gonna just do daily inspiration, and that has come into this thing, right, where it's like this talk show thing now. But then at the same time, I'm just like, I'm meeting so many amazing people like yourself. Like, there's no other way I would have met you, and to hear your testimony and you know, be inspired by that mustard seed of faith you had. And it's like, I'm trying not to cry right now because I done cried on 2 episodes already. I don't know what you GSL guests trying to do to me. Give me cry on this boo-hoo in every episode. But it's just it just blows my mind every time. Like every time I'm talking to people, and again, I don't think I knew these details about, you know, your story and whatnot. And so I'm glad, man. I'm glad that, you know, you kept the faith, that you're on the other side now, and you can share this testimony to hopefully encourage and inspire other people. I know. Okay, here's one of those things. You can let me know how you feel about it, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, people, they're like, things happen for a reason. And I know that sounds terrible, especially when you're going through something like terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, and if it's too personal, you can let me know. But I was gonna say, like, where was your faith and whatnot before this happened? Let me just ask that. Like, how was that for you? And like,
that's
that before this happened.
I'm totally happy to speak on it. So, for me, so I was raised in a religious setting, and being raised Catholic, which is a really strict religious setting, but not so strict with my family, but I sort of went through the steps and I was like, okay, I this makes sense to me, but I don't know if I like this structure. And so from there, I went on my own spiritual journey to try to figure out and understand, like, what is spirituality that's not necessarily attached to religion. And that was a journey in itself for me for several years, all the way up until this happened. And they offer so much therapy in the hospital. I had every type of therapy. And I had just become a therapist myself. So, you know, there was this very unique conversation that took place, because I'm also trying to help myself get through this, but it's tough to get through things alone. And she had asked me, you know, during times like this, a lot of people will really struggle, very specifically asking, like, the question, why me? And this is a question that I know we can so often ask, and it's like, we shouldn't ask it, but we do. And for me, in those moments, you know, I wanted to ask why me. And I would say the first 24 to 48 hours I did. But then I realized that no matter who I'm asking this question to, whether it be God or the power of the universe or myself or the doctors or the psychologist, no one was going to answer me directly. I wasn't going to get that direct answer. That was a powerless statement. And I realized that I could learn why me. I could learn it. That's that piece that you said, everything happens for a reason. I could eventually find that reason, but it wasn't coming to me in that moment. And I was losing my power in that moment. And I found that with a simple transition, I could take that power back. And I started saying, because me. I started empowering myself with my story, with my experience, with this moment, without knowing the actual reason, but knowing that I would come to it. And that for me, or knowing that it would be brought to me again through a connection with God, through spirituality, through the powers of the universe, I knew that somehow it would be brought to me, but I didn't know it. Power. And that transition point right there also really sparked me on a much more meaningful spiritual journey, that I knew this did happen for a reason. And I knew that it was in my power to continue with the momentum of this experience because that reason would unfold. So since then, it has, I feel, more spiritual and connected than I ever really have. And it's because I'm realizing that the power of my story, my testimony, my conviction is changing people's lives. And that's something that is the because me, that is the answer to my why. That's it's like I've received the answer in every time I tell the story, and every time someone reaches out to me to tell me how powerful it was or how life-changing it was for them. So it continues to connect me to God, to my spirituality, to, my quest for understanding more in that space as well.
I know it's a good question, man,
For sure.
For your transparency here and
Yeah.
everything. The main thing I love and that I guess resonates with me that you said was about like how, to me, it sounds like you was renewing your mind in that aspect. Like you could have just taken the negative route. You could have just like, why me? Putting blame on God and everybody around you, whatever. You could have handled it in a lot of different ways, right? But I feel like a lot of the times when I'm doing my Bible study and whatnot, I'm seeing where we need to be renewing our mind or not leaning to our own understanding and understanding that, there's a bigger thing at play versus what we just encounter, or what we see and things like that. And so, but in order to understand that, we have to do what you did in those moments, right? We have to kind of like, not just, I know it's hard, like when we're going through things to not look at it selfishly, like, because I'm going through this right now, you know what I mean? But on the flip side, I think also understanding that, okay, yes, I'm going through this. And yes, I may be wondering why, but I think the approach that you took with, going through your trial there, ultimately is what led you to be where you are and to be blessing so many people with your story. So, again, I commend you on all of that. And I guess that takes us back to mental health. It takes us back to, what you're working with now in regards to, because obviously, again, okay, how you feel about this?
Let's hear it.
A lot of people, we go through things, right? And we're like, oh, well, we feel like we don't have any power over ourselves. Like we don't have self-control, even though I believe we have it, right? And but there's people that the way that they live gives the impression that they don't have self-control. But you just exercise that, right? In your situation, like you took control of your mind in those moments to be like, you know what, I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm going to look for that little mustard seed of faith. I'm going to see if I'm going to try again and again to move my feet, whatever it is, right? So what do you, when it comes to mental health and all of these things, like, to me, you're proof that we have self-control. But what do you think about that? With people that say that and stuff, like, what would you say to someone that they're like, well, I can't control this or that, I don't have, I'm this way and I can't change, or whatever case is. Like, what do you think? What would you say to them?
I love the question so much. You are speaking right to my wheelhouse. Like, this is exactly what I do and what I love to empower people with. So, what it seems like you're specifically touching on is this, limiting behaviors. So, we might have heard those in the same realm as limiting beliefs, is that we as human beings are conditioned from the day we are born, and even before. There's studies, that take place that even before you think about the mom putting the headphones on the baby belly type thing, like there's actually proof in some capacities that we're conditioned even before we are actually born into the world, that every moment we live becomes a piece of our experience, and our experience becomes our parts of our thought process, and our thought process over time solidifies our beliefs. Our beliefs, though they have gone through that experience and thought pattern first, they become really strong, hardwired into our minds. This includes, in having beliefs is an incredibly powerful way to move through the world if those beliefs support you. But oftentimes, again, through the conditioning of our society, whether it be family, friends, relationships, our school environment, our work environment, systemic structures in society, there is so much conditioning that happens that is what we think is telling us about ourselves. So there's all these moments that are coming into our, like, let's say, for example, parenting. Though parenting is a beautiful thing and can be done in so many different ways, sometimes we might not realize that if we say, like men don't cry, for example, that they start it themselves because they've experienced it so much. When they start to think it because they've had that experience, it starts to solidify into that belief. So if we take that over a lifespan and we think about our lives as we are a fabric of our being, and every one of those moments, every one of those experiences is a thread in the fabric of who we are, then we have threaded a lot of beliefs, both good and bad, into that fabric. Mm-hmm. So when people say, this is just how I am, or I can't change that, or, that will never change about me, though it could be biological, it could be a fixed limitation, which is something that we physically cannot change. For example, if someone has, brown hair, for example, we can change the outside color of it, but the structure of it is brown hair, and that is just what it is. So those are fixed limitations. We can't move those out of the way, but limiting beliefs are the beliefs that we have been conditioned to hear our whole lives that became a part of us, like men don't cry. So if a man is going off of that, it's become a part of him if he's heard it his whole life, and that is his actual ingrained belief. But it's limiting because we know biologically and societally that's not actually true. Mm-hmm. So what I tell people, so that's a real sort of background of when people say, I absolutely can't change, or this is just how, it's important to understand that we don't know necessarily we're not able to pinpoint what has happened in our lives to get us to those beliefs. And though it's really difficult to tell someone your belief is incorrect, it's a little bit easier to tell someone that there are perspectives outside of your own that could help give a more full picture to that belief to change it. So That is, the very beginning of where we would start with that, because that's a tough one. A lot of people really do feel that they are the way they are, and that is unchanging. And I guess my advice is to understand that even though we can feel this way, there's more to our story that's happened in our unconscious our whole lives that we could work on and bring out to understand the full picture and why that is not true.
Hey, I I was sitting here thinking as well, like, well, obviously, I don't think we would have been here, but, just in this alternative world, like, where would you be if you stayed in that, like, if it ever crossed your mind during that time, right? During your
Yeah.
down season,
Mhm.
okay, well, this is what my life is going to be like. Would you have wood with your toe? You know what I'm saying? Like, would
Yeah.
you be walking? Would you be speaking? Would you have your business now? Would you know what I mean?
Right.
All those things. And I think that's something maybe we should think about when we're making those statements and decisions. It's like, would you prefer the alternative, or would you prefer, what you live now,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a good way to put it, and this might strong faith and belief in God, and that your energy goes where your beliefs are, where your conviction is. And beliefs, like I said, are powerful, important structures for us to live by. But if we live by a belief that's hurtful to us and our energy flows in that hurtful belief direction, that's going to continue to hurt us. But if again, if it's your belief in faith and in God and in the Lord, that's a powerful energy that will continue to flow in a positive direction. So, we can have positive beliefs and negative beliefs, or helpful beliefs and hurtful beliefs, but we need to know those hurtful beliefs, there's ways to untangle them and stop moving our energy towards them, because it's just not helpful for who we are.
Right. I wonder, like, again, see, I know you're like, why did I even bring this up? This girl keep talking about. I wanted to talk about something else. By all means, you can stop me and be like, okay.
No, I'm happy to.
But I guess I'm wondering, like, was this something that was kind of like proof to you at that point, where, like, you know what, there is something beyond me. There is something that is, I call it God and Jesus. Other people might call it something else, whatever. I'm not saying that they're the same things of what people call it, but I'm just saying I understand that other people call it different things. But anyway, like, would you say that like this, going through this, what you now is your testimony, right? Did that build your faith, right? Was that something that kind of was like, this showed me that there is a higher power and there is more at play than just, because again, you said you were fit, you were like, you probably not saying, I don't know, but I just know some people could be like, oh, I'm healthy, X, Y, and Z, and then these things, they just happen, right? And you're like, how did this even happen to me? And it can go either one or two ways. We can build our faith, and when we come out of it, or it could be this thing where either we don't come out, or whatever the case is, and it brings resentment and stuff. I mean, you don't seem to be resentful or anything. I'm just wondering, like, how has your faith grown when it comes to this?
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. So for me, I think that this experience reconnected me to my faith. I believe that I really struggled to find a faith-based relationship prior to. And again, I think that goes back to being raised in this structured religious space, and like sort of understanding that I could create a relationship in a different way and still have that power of connection, but not realizing how to do it, or how to move into it, I guess, and lean into it. And so this experience really reconnected me with a faith that I was looking for, to understand that, we all as human beings experience things that we don't expect to experience. It's just part of life. It's part of the human condition. It's part of, it and if we can wrap our heads around it, it's part of faith. Experiencing that, the understanding that how we feel doesn't mean that there is less of a power just because we feel hurt or bad or frustrated or mad or guilty. Again, it's part of the human experience. So untangling those things and understanding that, just because I'm experiencing something bad doesn't mean that this is a bad situation. Again, like I've been able to reframe it as one of the most powerful, beautiful things that's happened to me because it's changed my faith. And that's what I had to do, was to untangle the feelings from the faith and realize that this is actually a reconnecting moment. This is a reconnecting experience. This is actually bringing me closer, because I get to now understand something so major and so powerful through the eyes of a higher power, through a different realm of thinking and experiencing.
That's that next level thinking. That's what I call it, that renewal of mind, man. I'm happy to hear that, and thank you for sharing that and everything like that, because I feel like there's so much power in that as well, to see that there's going to be ups and downs. Even people that have been believers their whole life, whatever case is, there's still going to be things. And now maybe you've dealt with this or not, I'm not sure, but like, people that go through some of the like worst health things, like I would say cancer is probably one of those big things that people, but I find like those type of people, they have like the biggest smiles and the most faith and the most joy, you know what I mean? And maybe not all the time, but like sometimes, these people, and they speak so highly of life, and everything like that, to where again, it's a beautiful thing to see, and you're like, man, they're going through such a hard time. Like, how can they, how can they smile so big, or how can they, I guess that's one of those things again that shows that, not just things happen for a reason, but just like that, you can still, even in those down moments, you can still have that faith, love, joy, peace, and all those things. To then it resonates out of you through your smiles and through your actions and through your words and things like that. And so yeah, I think it's important to share the ups and downs, the good, the bad, and everything, because like you said, it's life and we'll still go through that, but like how you handle those things go to your work, that mental health. So I know you look go. I mean, what you want to share about the mental health aspect? Because I went too deep into your life.
Well, I think that, speaking on people who might have terminal illnesses, or who might have beat a terminal illness like cancer, it could go both ways. But I think what's so interesting is that when you're faced with that in life, and again, I haven't experienced this personally. This is sort of going from my own experience and also having worked with people who have gone through these experiences. But, and this could be repetitive, but you really start to reflect on what actually matters in your life, in your loved ones' lives. And you start to realize that the things that matter are often the most simple ones that we might have been taking for granted our whole lives. Mm-hmm. So there's this piece of no longer wanting to take those simple, beautiful things for granted anymore in life, but also those simple, beautiful things are often the ones that pair with faith and spirituality. They're often the ones that are a major part of it, a big foundation of it. Think virtues like wanting to, even just like love and how powerful love can be, and being a kind person, being a caring, generous, giving person, all of these things that are so simple and so easy, but many of us might have taken them for granted or might not have lived them out in the way that we know we can. So there's so many things that can happen when you're faced with something like that, that could, could change everything in your life and the lives around you. And I would say, if we're talking on like the mental health aspect of that too, where they're smiling and being kinder than, most people around. And I think it goes hand in hand. Again, there's this reframing in your head of just about everything when you're faced with something that's terminal or potentially terminal. Because this, all of a sudden, rather than measuring our life in time up until that point, we're now doing a 180 and measuring our life in time until the end point, potentially. So when our mind does that, flip the script, so to speak, everything else gets flipped on its head. And so that's where a lot of that, that change in personality, that real positive thinking, because again, we went from taking things for granted naturally. That's not, and I don't mean that negatively. I just mean that's a natural human quality, to not realize that, we could be taking things for granted, so to speak, to realizing that there's so much power in these things that we might not have given power to previously.
Yes. As you were talking, I'm just reminded of what you were saying earlier about, once you started to run again, you never wanted to stop, and it's just one of those, I'm not going to do it today, y'all. Y'all not going to, y'all better do this to me today. Miss Pretty crying on you. But that's just a beautiful and powerful, visual, as well as this whole thing. Again, I appreciate you and your time and you sharing so much with us. And, where can we find you and everything like that? Would you like to share that with us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity as well. I appreciate you opening up your space for me to do that. So if anyone would like to find me, everywhere you can find me at Bree_undeniably. If you just put in Bree Undeniably, you'll find all of my social medias. My website as well is breeundeniably.com. That's BRIUNDENIABLY. So that's where you can find everything from my podcast to my businesses, speaking engagements that I'm doing. I'm also actively looking for speaking engagements right now. So that's something that I'm working on. And I, again, appreciate the time and space.
Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else you would like to share with us before you go?
I think, that is all I have. The way that I like to end, and kind of the mantra that I've brought into my whole business, is to buy into the possibility of you. And that is something that I just like to push full force into with myself and others, that your possibility extends beyond what you can see in front of you. And if you buy into that possibility, there are beautiful, incredible things that can happen.
Amen. Look, I believe and receive that today. Thank you so much for visiting us, Miss Bree. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. Again, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to staying connected.
Miracle Sam's, let's go.
Thank you so much for watching Guys, Sex, and Love. And thank you to Miss Bree for joining us tonight. I hope that you all enjoyed the conversation. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And check out Miss Bree's content as well. Have a good night.
But I bet you wish it out.